Welcome to Betrayal Affairs. In today's video, my name is Lyra, and what I'm about to share with you is something that changed my life forever. It's a story buried in the heart of a small town where secrets don't stay hidden for long, and where every choice leaves echoes that seem to follow you through the narrow streets, across the fields, and even into your dreams. I had just returned home from college, a fresh graduate of 22, believing I was stepping back into a familiar and safe world. But I had no idea how much everything had shifted in my absence, how the people I thought I knew had transformed, and how betrayal can come not from enemies, but from those who sit across from you at the dinner table. I grew up in a town that most maps barely acknowledge. The kind of place where everyone knows not only your name, but your grandparents' names and all the stories tied to them. Life there was ordinary. The same shops, the same benches where old men gathered, the same fields stretching endlessly, the same market where gossip traveled faster than the fish smell on Fridays. My mother was well respected. She carried herself with a quiet authority that made people listen even when she wasn't trying. For as long as I could remember, she had been the strong one, the decision-maker, the woman whose approval everyone sought. She kept our house spotless, her hair always pinned neatly, her words sharp but fair. When I left for college, it was just the two of us. But when I returned, I discovered I was no longer walking back into the same house, the same arrangement. My mother had remarried. That alone wasn't the shocking part. She had every right to build a new life. What caught me completely off guard was who she had chosen. His name was Kolya, a man who, at first glance, seemed too young to be standing beside my mother in the role of a husband. He was 30, only 8 years older than me. A man still in the prime of his youth, broad-shouldered, with the kind of presence that drew eyes without him trying. He didn't have the heavy wear of age. Instead, he carried himself like someone who had lived just enough to gain strength, but not enough to lose hope. The moment I saw him for the first time, helping my mother unload bags from the back of his truck, I felt something coil inside me. It wasn't recognition, and it wasn't dislike. It was something heavier, confusing, the kind of awareness you don't want to admit. His voice was deep yet calm, his movements confident, and every gesture carried a subtle power. He smiled easily at the neighbors, and I noticed how women of all ages lingered just a little too long when they greeted him. In another life, he could have been a stranger I crossed paths with at a cafe, the kind of man who might ask to share my table when the place was full. But he wasn't a stranger. He was my mother's new husband. And that single detail made every thought I had about him dangerous. I told myself it was nothing, that I was simply surprised by the age gap, that my mind was exaggerating. But the truth was, from the very beginning, there was something in the way his gaze met mine that unsettled me. It wasn't improper, not at first. Just intense. As if he saw more than I was ready to show. And I hated how much I noticed it, how quickly my pulse betrayed me when his eyes lingered too long. That first summer back was unbearable in its heat. The town's air felt thicker than ever, clinging to your skin, suffocating. I spent my days in light dresses, cotton fabrics that offered little protection against the sun. And though I told myself it was only comfort I was seeking, part of me knew I liked how those dresses moved when I walked through the house, how they whispered against my skin. I noticed the flicker of his attention, the way he shifted in his chair on the veranda when I crossed the yard barefoot. He never said anything, and neither did I, but the silence between us became heavier with each passing day. Hooks often come disguised as ordinary moments, and in our story, they came through the simplest exchanges. Reaching for sugar in the kitchen while standing on tiptoe, hearing his voice ask why I didn't wear slippers, watching him pause longer than necessary before turning away. Every moment seemed loaded with unsaid words. And I found myself craving them, waiting for him to slip, for him to let something break through his restraint. The real shift began the morning my mother had to leave suddenly to visit my sick aunt in a nearby village. That left me and Kolya alone in the house, with the sun beating down and the air carrying the weight of everything unspoken. I wandered into the yard, sweat dampening the fabric of my dress, dust clinging to my feet, when I sensed his eyes on me. He leaned against the doorway with a cigarette in one hand, watching me sweep near the shed. "You shouldn't be doing that alone," he said, his tone casual, but his gaze anything but. I replied without turning, teasing in my own way. Better alone than with someone who never speaks. That moment was a hook in itself, a tug I hadn't expected to give. And it worked. His silence wasn't the same anymore. It wasn't calm, it was loaded. He watched me as though torn apart, and finally, he whispered words that still echo in my mind. "I'm not your father." The air between us thickened. I turned to him, met his eyes, and answered quietly, "I know." Those two words shifted everything. They pulled us across a line we hadn't acknowledged until then. From that day, every interaction became a dangerous game. When I went to the river to cool off, I half hoped he'd follow, and when he did, I felt both thrilled and terrified. Standing in the water, my clothes clinging to me, I caught him watching. Not approaching, not speaking at first, but simply staring as if trapped in his own battle. When he finally spoke, his voice was rougher than usual. "You're playing with fire, Lyra." My answer trembled, but it was honest. "And don't you like games?" He turned away that day, leaving me trembling in the water, but the tension only grew sharper. At night, I lay awake, wondering if he would come to my room, half terrified he might, half aching that he wouldn't. The anticipation itself was a torment, an invisible rope tying me tighter and tighter. And then one rainy morning, it snapped. My mother was gone again on errands, and I wandered around in one of Kolya's old shirts, the fabric brushing my thighs, the scent of tobacco clinging to it. When he saw me, he froze for a heartbeat, then forced himself into seriousness. "You'll get sick, dressed like that." I smirked, answering, "Then warm me up." He tried to resist. He told me if he started, he wouldn't be able to stop. And all I could whisper back was, "Then don't stop." That was the hook that finally pulled us both under. From that moment, everything changed. The game was over. The glances, the almost touches, the whispered warnings, all of it gave way to something real, something we could no longer deny. It wasn't about whether it was right or wrong anymore. It was about the fact that neither of us could walk away. Every night, every stolen moment became another step deeper into something both intoxicating and terrifying. But secrets in small towns never stay hidden. Neighbors began to notice the way we looked at each other. Rumors slithered through the market stalls, whispering of impropriety, of betrayal. My mother grew suspicious. She kept me closer, asked me to spend more time with my grandmother, hinted that perhaps I should leave for a while. But I couldn't. I was addicted, not just to him, but to the danger, to the rush of being wanted in a way that consumed us both. The cracks widened when my mother caught us in the hallway one evening. Nothing explicit had happened, but Kolya's hand lingered on my waist too long, his grip too sure. Her eyes were sharp, piercing through the silence as she asked, "What's going on here?" I lied, quick and shaky, blaming clumsiness, but her expression told me she didn't believe a word. From that moment, every meal, every conversation, was a battlefield of glances and silences. Yet the greater the risk, the more intense it became. We found ourselves pulled together in hidden corners, the pantry, the bathhouse, the barn. Each time, it was fiercer, as though we knew the clock was ticking, as though we were dancing on the edge of discovery. He whispered once, with desperation in his voice, "If we get caught, I'm finished." And I whispered back, "Then let's never get caught." But the truth is, secrets rot from the inside. And ours was no exception. My mother eventually saw enough, sensed enough, to understand. One morning, she looked at me across the kitchen table, her eyes colder than winter. "How long?" she asked simply. My throat tightened, and all I could manage was, "A long time." She didn't scream, didn't break plates, didn't even raise her voice. Instead, she spoke with a calm finality that cut deeper than any shout could. "I thought he became my husband. But it seems he chose to be yours. So now you're on your own." She packed her bags quietly and left, no drama, no explanations to the neighbors. just absence. I thought this meant Kolya, and I could finally be together without restraint, but I was wrong. Once the secret was gone, once the forbidden edge was stripped away, what we had began to lose its fire. The tension that had fueled us burned out, leaving behind something heavier. He grew quieter, more distant. I grew restless, haunted by guilt, by the image of my mother's face the day she left. One night, Kolya finally spoke the words I'd been dreading. "I think we've burned each other out." His voice was low, tired, filled with regret. I asked him desperately, "But it was real, wasn't it?" He nodded slowly. Real doesn't always mean right. The next morning, he left for the city, claiming he needed work, but I knew in my bones he wasn't coming back. I was left alone in the house, the walls soaked in a scent, the air still heavy with memories. Time passed, but nothing filled the void. Even now, when I stand on the veranda in the mornings, I swear I hear his voice in the distance, whispering my name. Sometimes I wonder if our story was love, or if it was simply betrayal wearing the mask of desire. And the scariest thought of all is that maybe I'll never know. Because this is only the beginning, not the end.